Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Mignot, CEO of cultural communications agency, D Flash. This is part of my really incredible series called 29 Days of Magic, where I interview a Black woman a day from all walks of life and have just a fantastic conversation. I am thrilled today to have April Rain, who's the founder and creator of the Oscar So White campaign, as well as the co-founder of She Will Rise. We're going to have a great conversation today about her career and what she's seen all of the years, and it's going to be just fantastic. Take a listen. Hey, April.
Hello, Laura.
How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good. We're into February, and I'm taking things in a good and abundant way going forward.
Love it.
So, the first question is always the same, and I'm always delighted by the answers. I'm sure you'll be no different. So, April, what was your first job?
My first job, I think, was working at McDonald's when I was like 16 or something like that. And the uniforms back then were all polyester. There were no pockets. They were horrible. And of course, so you're covered with grease at the end of the day. It was not great.
Oh, no pockets. What did you do?
Well, I mean, I guess they were worried about us stealing
nuggets.
Right.
Stealing some nuggets.
But I don't know. So you were just behind the counter and it was fine. I mean, I know all women want pockets in every single piece of clothing they have. and I am no different. But back then it just seemed really odd. But I mean, the fact that the uniforms were head to toe polyester was a much bigger deal than the fact that there were no pockets.
No, head to toe polyester while you're in that heat all day long just seems like my own personal version of hell. How long did you do that for?
Oh, not long. Probably just like a summer or something. My parents were not big proponents of us working during the school year because they wanted us to concentrate on our studies. So it was probably just 3 or 4 months.
Oh, okay. Not too bad. Okay. So we go from being trapped in polyester in high school to where you are today. So tell us about that career journey.
Well, McDonald's wasn't going to be it for me. So I completed high school, went on to college, went on to law school. My first job out of law school was at a firm. Decided I did not like that, and I was not rainmaker material, and so it didn't make sense for me to stay because I knew I would never make partner. Not only because I don't like to rainmake, but also because at that particular firm, the chances of a Black woman making partner were very, very slim. So I went to an agency instead. I was there for a long time. And then Oscar So White happened and I left that job and here we are.
So for the folks for the 3 people who don't know what Oscar So White is, can you just kind of go back and tell us why you started it and how it's evolved today?
Sure. Hello, 3 people. In January of 2015, as I mentioned, I was still a practicing attorney, and I was a huge entertainment consumer, Broadway and screen, big and small, and music. And so I was watching the Oscar nominations in my family room as I was getting dressed that morning. And I was in the family room getting dressed because Chris Hemsworth, who plays Thor in the Marvel series, was one of the presenters, and he was in a suit. And I said, listen, I need Thor in HD on the biggest screen in the house. So I was half dressed in
April, you and I have something in common.
I mean, and I'm sure like 3 billion other people, but yes, indeed. And he was lovely. So he's reading the nominations, and it just struck me that category after category, both in front of and behind the camera, there were no people of color nominated in any of the acting categories. And even when you talked about the behind the camera categories, like cinematography and directing and so on, there were very few, if any, people of color nominated, and very few, if any, women nominated in each category. And as your listeners will recall, 2015 meant, the films from 2014. So we're talking about Beyond the Lights, we're talking about Selma. So there were
Like,
fantastic
come on.
films. Right. There were fantastic films that came out that year. And so Twitter is my social media platform of choice, and my cell phone is typically embedded in my forearm. So I just pick up my phone and said, "Oscars So White." They asked to touch my hair, and as Black women know, you just don't do that. So at that time, I was late for work. So I finished getting dressed, went on to work. I checked back in on Twitter around lunchtime, and the hashtag based on that one tweet was now trending around the world.
Wow. Incredible. And
so it was, initially I was being snarky. And so the responses that we got in response to my tweet were equally snarky. Oscars So White, they find mayonnaise too spicy. Oscars So White, they wear Birkenstocks in the wintertime. You get it. It wasn't until a couple of days later that we transitioned the conversation from pettiness and sarcasm to one much more substantive about the lack of equity and representation, not just with respect to the Oscars, because they all have their issues, but throughout Hollywood and even now throughout the entertainment industry. So over the years, we're going into, my goodness, year 7 now.
wow.
Other people have created other similar hashtags like Grammy So White and Journalism So White and so on. And I think that's great because it continues the conversation about how important equity and representation are in every single industry, regardless of where you work.
And that's the thing. It's also, we've had this kind of weird set of circumstances. Like in the summer of 2020, we had all of these all the protests, and then all of a sudden everyone's reading all the books to try and learn how to be more equitable. And now in 2022, we're banning books. And it's such a bizarre kind of pendulum swing that seems to be happening to us right now. What would you say is happening in the entertainment business since you started Oscars So White?
It's always 2 steps forward, 1.5 steps back. So the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, the people who run the Oscars, made changes. They doubled the number of people of color and doubled the number of women within their membership ranks, which is good. But when you're going from, let's say, 8% to 16%, when the population that is actually going to see the movies is much, much more than that, it's really a drop in the bucket. And we've seen other organizations in other industries also make changes. The Grammys said that they're going to do better. Recently, we found out that the Golden Globes, which is the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, didn't have any Black members at all. And they were accepting, let's just say, gifts and luxurious items from studios that were up for nomination. So that didn't look good. So I think that what gives me the most hope is that actors and actresses and other filmmakers are no longer waiting for their seat at the table. Shirley Chisholm famously said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair, which I absolutely love. But I think what we're seeing now is that folks are creating their own production company. So not only are they no longer waiting for a seat at the table, they're creating their own mansion to put their own table in it. And that's really inspiring, I think. So John Boyega and of course, Viola Davis and Will Smith and others are saying they are going to create the art that they want to see on film. And I don't know that we saw that type of surge in interest in that way, 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's definitely been I would say in the last 5 years or so that we've definitely started to see this change. I mean, with Issa Rae and now with Quinta Brunson and Robin Thede, we definitely are seeing that like folks are like, I'll just make my own stuff. And it'll be fantastic. Like I love Abbott Elementary. It's my new favorite show. And it's great to see that like who the showrunner is and the executive producers are, and they're building TV that is for quote unquote everybody. And that is a drastic change that we hadn't seen before.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting, especially in the last 5 to 7 years, is that consumers, you and me, who sit on our couches and watch TV or, stream film, are much more savvy than we used to be. So we want to know who the costume designer is. We want to know who's working cinematography and doing the amazing lighting, for example, on Insecure. So even in the darkest rooms, we can still see our Black bodies. And so I think that because consumers are clamoring for more representation behind the camera, in addition to the actors and actresses we see in front, that's what's really making the change. Because for the movie industry, for the TV industry, as is the case for all other industries, money is the bottom line. And because we all have been home for these last couple of years, the streaming services are able to determine who is watching their offerings in a way that they never have before. Because if you think about it, if you go to a Cineplex, right, pre-COVID, you're going to a movie theater, you're giving them your $15 or however much it costs, they give you a ticket and you go sit in a darkened room. Well, they have no idea who you are. But when you sign up for Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime or any of the other ones, they know your demographic. And so they can say, oh, women are really interested in this. Let's make 10 more of these. Or, Black folks are really getting down with this. So let's do more of that. And so I think that's why we're seeing the shift and so many more shows and films that are reflecting aspects of experiences of people of color. Still not enough, but better than where we were.
Yeah, it's definitely better. And I think it's also because we had this sort of really interesting time with, at least with TV and the streaming services, as you say, we have this kind of almost golden age of TV. Because I can't remember a time when I have this much really good choice, no matter what I'm into, that's, being run by people of color, behind the cameras as well as in front of the cameras. And it's stuff that I can talk to my white friends about, where oh yeah, I'm watching that too, which is I think is the biggest shift, where it's coming around where it's oh, by the way, you guys are watching it too, great. And I would even say 5-6 years ago that wasn't the case. There was just stuff that we watched, and the stuff that my white friends watched, and there'd be network crossover if it was something like Scandal or something, or How to Get Away with Murder.
Absolutely. I think it's all about story. It's truly all about story. So if a story is being told well by good actors and good writing, then everybody's going to be interested. I think about Empire in the early days. It was a ratings juggernaut. Well, Black people are all things to everyone, but it wasn't just us, right? We weren't, right. I didn't know anybody that owned a Nielsen box. So it wasn't just us watching Empire, because it was a good story told well. And if you're looking for universal stories, they are possible for you to see them out there. One just has to broaden their frame of reference. And so you want to talk about a rom-com? Absolutely. Everybody loves rom-coms, but why haven't we had more rom-coms where the two leads are queer people, right? That's exactly. Important. And the story is the same, X falls for Y, and then there's some kind of drama and they break up, and at the very end they get back together. Well, lesbians can do that. Gay men can do that.
Exactly. Non-binary people can do that.
Right, just as easily as hetero folks can do that. And so there's no reason why we can't be more open-minded. And most importantly, the greenlighters, the people who are in control of which shows will make it to market, can't be more open-minded as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously your life changed from that one tweet. What are you working on these days?
What I'm most interested right now in is She Will Rise. So that's sistascotus.org. Our mission is to support President Biden in his promise to nominate a Black woman to the Supreme Court, and then to actually get her through the confirmation process. Because it's one thing to be nominated, but as Mary Garland and others can tell you, right, it's another thing to be confirmed. And we know that there are countless Black women, lawyers, judges, and otherwise who are eminently qualified to sit on the bench. And this will be the first time. I mean, the Supreme Court is over 200 years old. We've had approximately 114 Supreme Court justices, and I think 108 of them have been white men chosen by white presidents. And so the Supreme Court, in our mind, should represent the demographic that they are making law and enforcing law for, right? So if we're talking about over 300 million people, we know that this country is becoming browner every year, but our concerns regarding, let's say, maternal health and environmental justice and civil rights, there's no one on the court who can speak to the lived experience of Black women. And so that's why we think this is so very important.
Oh, amazing. I'm so glad to hear this. Yeah, because I am excited, but also terrified of the foolishness that she's going to have to go through to get confirmed. But I'm also kind of like, we've been new, because I've been a Black woman all my life. And so I know what the world looks like. And the foolishness that we've had to put up with for folks who think that we're somehow not qualified. And I mean, that's the thing that's been bugging me about, like, oh, they're so upset. How is an affirmative action pick? I'm like, so you were totally cool with every white dude who got there who clearly wasn't qualified. And do you somehow think that, you know, President Biden is going to pick someone who's not ridiculously qualified and an amazing jurist, has qualifications for days, and probably is more qualified than the ones who are probably sitting on the bench right now? Like, what's wrong with you folks?
Well, I think that's exactly right. You know, what we know, the statistics, the research shows that the white women benefit from affirmative action more than any other demographic in this country. And yet when Amy Coney Barrett, who is not qualified to sit on the Supreme Court, was nominated, no one was talking about affirmative action then. But we've heard that scream from the right, from conservatives, several times now with respect to an unnamed, we don't even know who this woman is
literally
yet.
Unnamed.
An unnamed nominee from President Biden. And so if it's not gender, then what is it? Well, we know the answer. And why is that? Because, as you say, we have to be twice as good to get half as far. I'm sure all of your listeners have heard that from their parents at one time or another. And so our purpose with She Will Rise is to support the nominee as she's going through this process, because we know it's going to be difficult. Regardless of how qualified she is, she will be looked upon as lesser than, which makes no sense. And in the past, we have seen other presidents specifically say, I want to nominate a Catholic person to be on the Supreme Court. I want to nominate an Irish person. Like, they were very specific and no one batted an eye. But here we are now, you know, with Black people being the large percentage that they are of this population, without representation on the court, because all due respect to Justice Thomas, he is not reflecting the interests of most African Americans in this country.
Oh, exactly. And also, who is the largest voting bloc for Democrats? Like, let's be real.
That's the other thing. That's right. And you know, and so there's also a loyalty piece there, because Black women show up and show out every single time, and did so for President Biden. And so not only is this necessary because it should be so, but also because it's a promise kept from the campaign that was jump-started truly by Representative Clyburn, you know, in South Carolina, because Biden initially was on the ropes. Yeah,
I mean, Representative Clyburn basically saved him in South Carolina, and like when he gave that endorsement, like the whole campaign changed, and as a result of that, we now have President Biden and Vice President Harris. I'm like I said, I can't wait to see the amazing woman that he picks. I know that she'll be ready for this absurdity that she's going to have to go through. I wish she didn't have to go through it. Is my most ardent wish. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. But we have this very peculiar set of circumstances that we're in right now, where it's as if we're regressing, and you're again banning books about Toni Morrison, and like it's like, are you serious? So, and throughout history, there's always been this weird, like, pendulum swinging backwards whenever we have a lot of advancement and progress. And so we just have to make sure that we keep pushing the pendulum forward and don't want it to swing backwards at this particular moment, especially.
Absolutely. And it's not just the eventual nominee, it's also her family, because the media and everyone else will dig deeply, and so, everybody's got that cousin that doesn't get invited to the cookout anymore because they did something that, that was outside of, decency or the norm or what have you. And you look at Justice Kavanaugh, and some of the issues that he had during the confirmation. And he was not scrutinized in the way that I think he should have been because of some of the allegations against him. So, we are here to support President Biden and his nominee. We will be pressing hard on the Senate to confirm the nominee just as quickly as they did Amy Coney Barrett, despite her lack of qualifications. And so if folks want to, get involved, do more, they can go to Sista SCOTUS, SISTA, SCOTUS for Supreme Court of the United States.org. We have a petition there that folks can sign that will say to the president and to the Senate, yes, it is time for Supreme Court justice. We promise not to spam you. There's also a judicial tracker on there so that you can see the Black women who are coming through the pipeline, because I think there are about 6 to 8 Black women whose nominations are just sort of sitting there waiting to be confirmed. And to his credit, President Biden has nominated more Black women to the bench than any other president, including Obama, in history.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, we'll absolutely share all that in the show notes because folks need to see this, and I want to see this judicial tracker and see what's going on with these folks as well. So, thinking back on what you've been able to do over the years, what do you think you'd tell 25-year-old April?
Oh, 25. Okay, 25 was right out of law school. Oh, I think I would say being more judicious in your professional choices. I think that at least in my generation, I'm 51, when we were coming out of high school and chose to go to college, if you wanted to be a quote unquote professional, that meant you were either a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or an accountant. Like those are the 4 choices. And that was
yes.
it. I was not going to do anything with bodily fluids. I was not big on numbers, and engineers sounded sort of scary. And so lawyer it was. And I think that people now have so many more choices in creating the career and the life that they want to lead. And so I think we were also told, take the first job you get and then stay there forever because you never know, and it's good job security, and you're making decent money and all the rest of that. But there was never a question about happiness.
Right.
Is this
like,
job
are you really
fulfilling?
happy doing this job, or is it
Right.
killing your soul?
Is this job fulfilling? Can you see yourself being happy doing this job? And I really think that those are questions, especially 25-year-old people should ask themselves, is this something you want to do forever? And if not, what's your exit plan? What are you doing, not just so that one day you get so overwhelmed that you just quit with no safety net? What are you doing to ensure that you can quit and go on to something bigger and better and more fulfilling, hopefully financially as well as personally? So I think I would say be more judicious in your choices and be more thoughtful.
No, I think that's great advice. Because especially now, because it's almost like you have option overload. And so it's really about taking the time to think about what do you want to do right now? Could you do this now? Could you do this for another 10 years, another 5 years? And figuring that stuff out along the way. But making smart choices is the key for all of that.
Agreed. And I think what I love about millennials and Gen Z is that they don't seem to have, at least compared to Generation X, my generation, they don't seem to have the loyalty to their employer, and in the best possible way. So if in 18 months they say, you know what, this isn't for me, I tried it, I don't like it, I'm going to do something else, they just leave. And I think that's great, because it's not a freedom that I felt like I experienced a long time ago. It was, you've got a good job, don't rock the boat, just put your head down and do the work and pay your mortgage and have your kids and all the rest of that. And so I love the fact that younger folks are being more intentional in their choices and choosing. The way I live now is to choose joy every single day. I am chasing joy. I am living with abundance, and anything that doesn't serve that doesn't stay.
Oh, I love that. Same here. I'm absolutely chasing joy now. It's like, if this isn't fun, why am I doing it? Well, what's the point?
That's right.
So, obviously you're probably super busy. And you're bi-coastal at the moment. What in the world do you do for your self-care?
It's always a really tough question, because I think self-care looks differently to different people. So sometimes self-care for me means carving out time and putting it on my calendar, so it is as important as any other appointment during the day, to read for leisure. I may take a full hour and just read, and I have to put it on the calendar or it's not going to happen. But I love that. I also love to travel, and it's harder now that we're in the middle of this pandemic, but I still make time for it. And, to be honest, I feel more comfortable traveling outside of the country than I do within the country. So, if I'm in DC and I decide I want to go to New Orleans or for a weekend, I can just jump on a plane. Okay, great. But Louisiana's numbers with respect to COVID aren't fantastic right now. But if I decide I want to go to Bermuda, I've got to have a test before I get on the plane. I'm tested in the airport. Once I'm there for 3 or 4 days, I'm tested again. And so I feel a little more comfort about the people who are around me. I'm doing everything I can to stay safe, completely vaccinated and boosted and all the rest of that stuff. But it's everybody else sitting next to me on the flight or on the, whatever public transportation I'm choosing that I'm more concerned about. So travel for me is self-care, and still living, chasing joy. That's part of my self-care. Getting up every day, looking at my calendar and saying, okay, am I going to tackle all of these things today? And if not, if I don't feel like doing something, can I push it for a day because maybe I'll feel better about it tomorrow? Am I sitting on the fence about something? If not, let's go ahead and make a decision. All of those things are me practicing self-care to ensure that I am staying aligned with my purpose.
Awesome. And so true. Like, you've got to find, one, schedule it, two, get out of here. Like, I'm a big proponent of getting away. So I'm right there with you. And again, if it doesn't serve me, I'm not doing it anymore. I think, we didn't survive a pandemic to go back to our old ways of doing things. And so we've got to put ourselves first, make sure we focus on our rest and do what makes us happy.
That's right. Exactly.
And so, last question for you. Do you have a give and or an ask of the audience?
I would love the audience to go to sisterscotus.org and sign the petition. It takes about 34 seconds, and it will just say to both President Biden and to the Senate that it is time for a Black woman as a Supreme Court justice. You can follow the She Will Rise hashtag on all the social media platforms to get more information. There are lists out there of qualified individuals, and there's obviously a plethora of information at the sisterscotus.org website. So please sign the petition.
Absolutely. As soon as I can get off, I will be doing exactly that. April, you are just so wonderful. And thank you so much for all the incredible work you do. I love what you're doing with She Will Rise, and I'll help amplify as much as I possibly can. It's necessary and needed. And thank you so much for being part of 29 Days of Magic.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Awesome. And we'll put all the details in the show notes. You can follow, sign a petition, follow April on all the social medias. And let's make sure that we have a really amazing Black woman on the Supreme Court who doesn't have to go through every like scary, terrible thing that we're anticipating. Fingers crossed for us all. And that is our show.